In today's gospel, what we have are three parables kind of describing the kingdom. And you have the parable of the enemy who sows the weeds into the wheat. You have the parable of the kingdom of heaven like the mustard seed, the small seed that grows. And then you have the parable of uh, the woman who took the measures of the small amount of yeast, put that into the wheat flour until the batch was leavened. So again, Jesus could have talked about it, could have talked about the fact that the devil is still active within the church, even though, in a way, when we think about Jesus on the cross, taking upon our sins, our past, our present, our future sins, certainly the devil was defeated, and certainly we'll see the defeat of the devil in terms of the final judgment. But for right now, the devil is still active, still sowing seeds of discontent, still sowing seeds of animosity, still sowing seeds of false ideas of false pleasure, all these kind of things we see him doing. So what happens is that again you have the weeds and the wheat. The weed looks exactly like the wheat until it's time to harvest, because they look very close to one another. But at the time of the harvest, they begin to differentiate themselves. So you don't want to have that the weed, because if you had the weed, it's going to make your stomach very, very sick. So what they do is that they take out the weeds, throw them and burn them, but the wheat, they keep and they store it in the barns. So again, that idea of the sowing the evil, sowing this even within the goodness of the church, even within the goodness of the grace of God, the devil's still active, still sowing all these different things within the church. What you have in the kingdom of being like the mustard seed, a mustard seed is something that you would never want to sow in a field. It says that he sowed that in the field. Again, just like the person who threw all the seed willy nilly, you would never want to do that with a mustard seed. A mustard seed would be like the equivalent of trying to plant either bamboo or planting English ivy. If you're going to plant it, then it's just going to take over. It's going to take over everything. It's going to take over, and you cannot stop it. So that is the situation with the mustard seed. So mustard seed, very small seed. They say like 700 can fit in like a gram. Those little packets of sugar or packets of equal or whatever, they can fit in that. So 700. So a very small seed, but yet it grows to a large plant, begins to take over. So too within the church, we think about the church starting out with such small beginnings, and yet within 40 years of the death of Jesus, here it is on three continents. It's in Europe, it's in Africa, and it's in Asia. So again, the idea that it eventually does take over, it does eventually spread its plants. It cannot, it can be only stopped with great difficulty, but even then, it will find a different way to affect its own growth. So again, that idea of the church being like that the church is that which cannot then be stopped. We think about in the Acts of the Apostles where the Pharisee Gamaliel gets up and talks to the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin want to, bring down the law heavy on the apostles. And he basically says, if God is behind this, then you can't stop it. If God is behind it, it's not going to stop. So you can do what you will, but it's not going to stop. Now, if it's of human origin, it will find a way to stop itself. And he talked about different people who said that they were the Messiah, or different people who said they were somehow important, and they were maybe a little bit for a while, but then all of a sudden things occurred and it kind of petered itself out. So, but if it's from the Lord, it's not going to do that. So again, that idea of the parable. And then lastly, it talks about the measures of wheat, of yeast. It's put into the wheat flour. And the one thing about it is that it just takes a little bit to affect the entire batch. And really, when we think about Christianity, we think about Christians who are wise within their faith, who really take Christianity seriously. They're not just there at the pool, just kind of do a little dipping the toe into the water, but they're diving in. The ones who really do truly dive in are the ones who really begin to have an effect on the lives of others, because they bring that joy, they bring that peace, they bring the blessings of God into their lives and to the lives of others. And so they begin to have an effect upon the people in their community, in their workplace. They begin to have that effect because they see themselves as not living just for themselves, but living for others. And so in doing that, they want to have that effect on the lives of others. And so what Jesus does in this gospel is that he talks about the three parables. He talks about the enemy, the devil that is still active, even though in a way defeated and awaiting that final defeat, still active in the lives of the members of the church. You think about the idea of the mustard seed, that small seed that can grow and cannot in a way be stopped. And then lastly, we think about the measures of the yeast that go into the wheat flour that leaven the batch. And just that little tiny bit can have a great effect even upon those great measures of wheat. Thanks. God bless.